Hello and welcome to the deVere live webinar series. My name is William Trayford and this is our 24th live webinar. I'm delighted today to be welcoming James Minns, who's the head of residency and citizenship for the deVere group, talking about our topic today, passport to freedom. Going to be a very interesting topic about citizenship and residency around the world. Okay, so before I hand over to James, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through the format for today, and just to let people that haven't joined us before know how this, what the format is for the webinar. So first of all, we're going to run a poll. So we want to know your opinion about the topic. What we'll do after that is then I'll hand over to James, who'll go through his presentation. And during that presentation, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of questions that come to your mind. Okay, so what you'll see at the bottom of your screen is a chat box. Now in that chat box, what you need to select is all panelists and attendees, and then put your question into there. And what I'll do after James's presentation is we'll have 10 to 15 minutes where I can ask those questions directly to James, and he'll give you the answers to your questions. And then at the very end, we'll also give you the opportunity to reach out and get more information on this topic or other topics around it. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch our first poll. So what we want to know is what interests you about gaining a different passport. Okay, is it the ability to travel? Is it living in another country? Cutting ties perhaps from your current citizenship? Are there tax benefits you're looking for, or is it something else completely? All right, so I'll leave that up there for you to vote, and we'll release the results of that after James' presentation and also get his opinion on it as well. So with that, James, I'll ask you to turn on your camera and your mic. So James is joining us live from the UAE. And he's going to be
Hi guys. I'm not sure why I can't turn my video on. Do you want to see my very, very attractive face?
Of course we do.
Sure. You could hear me, but it's saying I'm not able because the host has stopped me from doing it. So that's fine. I mean, you don't need to see me anyway, if that's the case. But it's lovely to be welcomed into this series of webinars. I know you've had a very successful series so far from the offices in China. So let me give you a sort of background on myself and what around the topic in which we're going to discuss today. So myself, I've been working for the deVere group now for the last 10 years. So I originally came out into the Middle East at the end of 2010. And joined deVere in the wealth management side of the business, and brought up my brung across my existing client bank. And oh, here we go. You can probably see me now, hopefully. So from myself, I've been, as I said, sort of been with the company for the last 10 years. And for me, it was all about how I can help across the board when clients have lots of different questions when it comes to all types of different investments. And with deVere, it gave me the structure and able to do that. So across lots of different investment categories, asset classes, within my client bank and within the clients that I dealt with over the last 10 years, I was able to offer them lots of different things. Now, about 4 years ago, I decided that I wanted to go into the corporate side of the business. And I was really interested in looking at residency and citizenship as a topic, because I personally believe it's extremely highly personalized advice to give to clients, because we're not only just changing their financial futures and their financial positions, but also where they might want to live and where they might want to be, become a resident, or to operate businesses, or to be able to have freedom of travel. So this type of business is something that I really enjoy. And 4 years ago, we started looking at lots of different residency and citizenship options across the world. And when we looked at it, I want to just share with you my first understanding of the topic. So I think when we look at residency and citizenship, I've really got to understand the client and the client's family and get them to really think about the reasons and the justifications why they may look to make a positive change to either their residency or their citizenship. So I've got to get them to firstly understand the difference. So the difference between residency and citizenship. Think about me here in Dubai. I've lived here, worked here, conduct businesses here for the last 10 years. I'm a resident here. My residency is based on my employment. I can live here, work here, conduct business here. My kids can go to school here as long as I'm employed by my employer and given a residency permit in my passport. So residency is just that. It gives you the option to live, work and conduct business in another country. Me here in the Middle East, I'm in the UAE. No matter how long I spend here in the UAE, I'm never going to obtain full citizenship here. There's not a citizenship program for the UAE. So I'll only ever have residency here. So when you look at citizenship, it's a complete change. It's a change in passport. It's a change in taxing right. It's obviously the ability to also live, work and conduct business in another country, but you get the same passporting rights as a national, as someone born in that country or that holds that citizenship. So when I talk about residency and citizenship, it's really important to understand the difference, because there are some residency programs which, like the UAE, doesn't lead to citizenship, but there are also some residency programs that do lead to citizenship. And how does that work for a client? And how long does it take? And what do you have to give up? And how much time do you need to spend in another country for you to do that? On the flip side, citizenship is the same. There's no point in me giving you a citizenship just to be able to jump on a plane and travel the world if your ultimate goal is to go and live in another country. Because some of the citizenship programs that we can offer will only give you just that, which is the ability just to jump on a plane and travel around the world. But when I get to understand, and when the guys around the world that work for deVere get to understand the client and the family's needs, then we can look at specifics. We can understand exactly which residency or citizenship program would be best suited for that family. So predominantly when we sit down with clients to begin with, it's really to look at the justifications and reasons behind it. So firstly, I would always look at visa-free travel. Okay, I was very lucky. I was born in the UK. That gave me a passport and a citizenship document that allowed me to jump on a plane to pretty much travel anywhere I wanted to. So with a UK passport, I can travel to 156 countries with no visa whatsoever or visa on arrival. So at the moment, I can jump on a plane and go to pretty much most countries in the world without having to apply for a visa. Now, I'm based here in the Middle East. There are certain peripheral countries around me where their citizenship documents are very poor for traveling. So think about somewhere like Pakistan. Pakistan, you can only travel to 35 countries without any visa. So if visa-free travel is something that's important to you, then it's important to look at why you may make a positive change to either your residency or your citizenship. The next thing really is the opportunity to live, work and conduct business somewhere else. So I often speak to clients that come to me and say, James, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to the US, I want to go to Canada, Australia, UK, wherever that may be. And I've got to boil down to the real reason behind that. Is it to work? Is it to live? Is it to retire? Is it to send their children there to get education? Is it just to conduct businesses? By looking at changing your residency and citizenship, you maybe have the ability to do all of those things. Businesses is something which is really important, especially when we're looking at the Far East and those passport holders wanting to set up European or US operations. How do they do that? How do they do it? By changing their residency or citizenship, not only to be able to set up businesses and conduct businesses globally, but also for tax. How can we mitigate tax? How can we set up businesses in the most tax efficient environments? So by looking at residency and citizenship, we can also help aid conducting of businesses overseas. Now, I've got 3 children myself, so I know that they are the most important thing to any parent. And I think that's something that is also extremely important when we look at their future. I want to, as a parent, give my children the best. So whether that's the best education, the best start in life, and I'm no different from any other parent. So if it's for education, how can I send my children to Europe or to the US for schooling? And how can they then stay on post-education? It's easier to get education visas for them to go and study in the UK or the US. But what about when they finish? When they finish, do they want to have the ability to continue to work there, operate businesses there, or even just as a better starting point from a job prospect side of things? Now, retirement and healthcare, they go hand in hand. Okay, for me, as I said, I'm not planning on retiring here in Dubai, but where do I want to go? Now, Brexit for me as a Brit is definitely meant that I'm going to need to make a positive change from my residency standpoint if I don't want to live in the UK in retirement. So I will personally have to look at changing my residency or citizenship at a later point in time because of what's happened between the UK and the EU. So retirement is really important, not only on the fact that I might want to travel the world when I stop working, but also where do I want to reside and how much tax do I want to pay by doing it. Tax is extremely important. I bear no bones about the fact the reason why I live here in Dubai, I don't pay any income tax and I haven't done for the last 10 years. Now, by looking at changing your residency and citizenship, there are certain places in the world which make you become more tax efficient. A lot of work that I'm doing at the moment are on nationals from places like South Africa, from the US, where there is highly taxed regimes in both locations on income, on estate tax, on IHT. All these things need planning. So if you're looking to make a tax mitigation play, then also we can do that by looking at making a positive change to either residency or citizenship. Now, lastly, I look at some clients here, especially in this particular region, where there are certain sanctions and security concerns about them returning home. Now, there is a lot of that, as I said, in the Middle East at the moment, for places like Lebanon, Syria, Sudan. There's a lot of clients that I'm dealing with at the moment where they don't want to return home because of security risks. They can't place money inside banks or investments in those locations because of sanctions or security concerns about receiving that money back. So they will make a positive change from residency and citizenship play by looking at that as an option. Now, that's just a bit of a basic overview, if you like, of why a client may look to either change their residency or citizenship. It's extremely important to look at both things and the ultimate goal from the family perspective. And it might be a multitude of those reasons on the screen or any others. Now, when we look at it and we sit down and boil down to the two different things, I split them up into two different sections, one being European residency and then one being citizenship. Residency, as I sort of mentioned, is the ability to live, work and conduct business in another country. Now, Europe, there are lots of programs. There are lots of programs from a residency standpoint. Three of the main ones are Portugal, Cyprus and Greece. You may have heard of Malta, Montenegro, Germany, UK. They all have a residency program. Now, residency gives us the ability to live, work and conduct business in another country. And you can see that the three that I've put on the screen, Portugal, Cyprus and Greece, all three of these programs are completed by buying a freehold property. Now in Portugal, that starts from 350,000 euros, Cyprus being 300,000 and Greece being 250,000 euros. Now you may think that because Greece is the cheapest option, that's the option which we do the most European residency. Now it's actually Portugal. And the reason behind that is because when you look at the individual programs and how they work and how they operate, unless you physically want to go and live in either Greece or Cyprus for the next 7 years and to become a full tax resident in either of those locations, then you can't apply for full citizenship. So if it's just residency you're looking at, then that's fine. But if ultimately your ultimate goal is to get citizenship for another country, then Cyprus and Greece, Montenegro, Germany, and the UK, all of those programs you need to go and live there, work there, and conduct business there for 7 years and spend a minimum of 183 days in those countries for that to turn to citizenship. So that's the reason why Portugal has become so successful from a European residency program. And that's why I'm going to go through that one in a little bit more detail. But just to give you an idea, we as a company can offer all the different solutions, but I'm just going to go through Portugal in a bit more detail because it's the most common and most preferred option when we look at European residency. So Portugal, the way that that works is we go and buy a freehold property. Now that property can be in one of two categories. The first category can be a property that is a new build property, and that can be anywhere in Portugal at the moment. Now, if we're buying a new build property anywhere in Portugal, then the minimum level of investment is 500,000 euros. Now, if it's for a property that's over 30 years old, going through an area of regeneration and the property will be refurbished, then we can look at €350,000 as a starting option. But effectively, it's a property purchase. It's a property and an investment play. We're buying a property. That property can be fully let, it can be fully managed. And once we are a full title deed owner of that property, we can submit residency. Now, that's obtained relatively quickly. It takes about 4 months from when you're a title deed owner. And we can include dependent children up to the age of 25 and dependent parents over the age of 65. And it offers the ability to maintain residency in Portugal with having extremely low visitation to the country. Now, this slide, I'm sorry, is slightly wrong because it's changed as of last week, but it actually only means that you need to spend 14 days, 2 weeks, every 2 years in Portugal to maintain your Portuguese residency. So you get residency for the first 2 years, and that's conditional based on you visiting the country for 2 weeks and maintaining to hold that property. Now, what does that give you? It gives you the ability to live there, work there, conduct business there for 365 days a year. You can travel throughout the Schengen region. It's extremely peaceful, politically stable. If you look at certain parts of Portugal, places like the Algarve, there's 300 days of sunshine, more golf courses than I could ever play. And it's an extremely nice place to go and live. Now, after you've completed that first 2 years, your residency is then renewed up to year 4. And at year 4, the same question is asked. Have you been to Portugal for 2 weeks? And do you still own the property? If the answer is yes to both of those questions, your residency is then renewed up to year 6. Now, in year 6, what happens is that in year 6, we can either apply for one of two things. We can apply for permanent residency. Now, permanent residency will give us the ability to sell the asset, to dispose of the asset, and just hold permanent residency in Portugal forever without having any sort of investment there. Or if you then take a very basic Portuguese test, which can be done in any international test centre in the world, then you can apply for full Portuguese citizenship. And that full Portuguese citizenship is a full EU passport, which gives you the ability to not only live, work and conduct business in Portugal, but gives you the ability to go and do that anywhere in the EU. So Italy, France, Germany, Spain, Greece, Ireland, Portugal, without any visa restrictions whatsoever. So in 6 years, that can turn into full EU citizenship, which is the 4th strongest passport in the world. So we buy an investment, we buy a property, that property gives us a yield as an income. Now, typical rental yield net is between 4 and 5% a year on a Portuguese property. And if we're looking in certain areas in Portugal, the growth can match that around between 4 and 6% on an annual basis. Now, that's an asset. We're buying an asset which is growing in value. And then in 6 years' time, as long as you've done your Portuguese language test, then you can become a full Portuguese citizen, which then gives you the same, if not better, passporting rights than my British passport, because it's full EU, allows you to go and live, study and work in any of the 28 EU countries, and it also allows you visa-free travel to 164 countries with no visa restrictions at all. Now, whether it's the residency program or the citizenship you ultimately attain in Portugal, there's free healthcare within having either residency or citizenship. There's the ability to set up businesses across the EU with either residency or citizenship. And there's a really nice tax law in Portugal, which means that the first 10 years that you become a resident in Portugal, you can pay a maximum capped tax rate of 10% on any foreign income or any pension income if you go and live in Portugal full time. So it's an extremely nice place to go from a retirement perspective, even for someone like me who's a Brit, or for someone who's German, who's Swiss. There's a lot of Europeans that are retiring to Portugal because of this tax incentive, which is incentivizing people to go and live there and retire there. The healthcare system is very good. It's an extremely nice place to live with a lower cost of living than most parts of Europe. And also there's an extremely nice tax incentive for us to go and live there. So Portugal's a very good program, very easy, and it's got a really strong investment case. Now, when we look at citizenship and we look at a complete change, citizenship again comes into 2 different forms, if you like. There are citizenship documents where they will give you the ability of freedom of travel and low tax environments. And then there are citizenship, a little bit like Portugal, which gives you better access to Europe. So when it comes to it, and if you Google obtaining citizenship, you typically will find lots of adverts around the Caribbean. So the Caribbean, off the east coast of Miami, there are lots of different islands that are all British Commonwealth islands. Now, there are 5 in particular that offer the ability to obtain citizenship through either a donation, which is a gift from a client to the government, or from a real estate purchase, from an investment. Now, out of those 5 different islands, which they all do something very similar. So St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis and Grenada, all 5 of those islands are obtained very quickly. So we can get a citizenship within 4 to 5 months, and we can include dependent children, dependent parents, and all of those 5 islands will give you the ability to have visa-free travel to a minimum of 136 countries with either no visa or a visa in arrival. So if you want to go and become a global resident, if you like, then we can use the Caribbean. That gives you the ability to go to the Schengen area, the UK for 6 months of the year, certain passports, Russia, Hong Kong, Singapore, China, no visa at all. There's no residency requirements. There's no reason for you to go there. Everything's done remotely, so there's no interview. It's all done by paperwork, and a lot of that paperwork is due diligence on you and as an individual and on the family. Excuse me. Now, with all of these citizenships, there's no wealth tax, gift tax, inheritance tax, foreign income, or capital gains tax. So they're extremely tax efficient, but tax will always depend on your residency, where you end up, where you spend the majority of your time. Now, if you don't spend the majority of your time in any location and you try and manage your days and become a global tax resident, then with a Caribbean citizenship, we can help mitigate the majority of the tax that you may be liable in certain other locations. Now, typically out of those 5 islands, we only really recommend one. Now, the reason we recommend one over the others is because Grenada is really the strongest Caribbean citizenship that is offered. Now, Grenada, like all of the other Caribbean islands, will give you the ability to travel the world, but Grenada gives you the strongest traveling document. Now, that will allow you to go to 141 countries with no visa. It's one of the only countries and one of the only citizenships in the world that will give you the ability to go to the UK for 6 months of the year, continental Europe for 6 months of the year, Singapore, Hong Kong, China and Russia with no visa. So you can go back into China at any time with no visa at all. So what else does Grenada offer that the others don't? Now, Grenada is the only citizenship program in the world that has a bilateral trade agreement with the US, which allows a Grenadian citizenship holder the ability to go to America and set up their own business in the US and become a resident in America. So it becomes extremely important when we look at specific countries of where clients want to end up. If they ever want to end up in the US, then Grenada is a really good route into America. Now, there's no interview, there's no physical residence test with Grenada, and they're exactly the same with all of the other Caribbean passports. There's no wealth tax, gift tax, inheritance tax, foreign income or capital gains tax. And this citizenship is enjoyed for life, and it can include the entire family dynamic. Now, on the screen, you'll see the starting application. Now, we use a real estate route when we look at Grenada, and we have to use a government-approved property. Now, a government-approved property, it's a small island in the Caribbean. There are only 3 government projects that have government approval for using for the citizenship program. We use the Kimpton Kawana Bay, which is an intercontinental hotel. Now, this is a government-approved property. Now, from a single applicant for Grenada, single passport, including the investment into the hotel is $315,000. For a family of 4, an application for 4 passports would be $350,000. And out of that, 220 of that is invested into this hotel. After 5 years, that can be sold, and you would have enjoyed some income over that period of time of approximately 4% a year from the hotel. Now, this, as a passport, as I mentioned, it gives you the ability to add on the E2 visa. Now, why is that really special? Now, an E2 visa gives you the ability to go into the US. but it gives you the ability to go into the US with your own business. It can either be a business of your choice and your existing business that you want to take to America. It can be a business that's already started and you want to buy in the US, so a petrol station or an accountancy firm. Or it could be a franchise. If you want to go and buy a Starbucks or a McDonald's, you can go and do that through this particular route. Now, what does that allow you to do? Well, it allows you to go and set up that business. It allows your spouse to go and work in any state doing any job in the US. And it also allows your children to study. And if you're there as a resident in the US, then you're paying interstate tuition fees for your children to go and study there. Now, the great thing with an E2 visa, with an addition on top of a Grenadian passport, is speed. Now, if I ever speak to a Chinese client and the Chinese client wanted to go to America and they go down the typical green card route, which is something called an EB-5. Now, a green card gives you the ability to go and become a resident in America. It used to be extremely easy for a Chinese national or someone with a Chinese passport to go into the US with an EB-5. It would take typically 18 months and the client would go and become a resident in the US. And because the population is so large in China, what it did was that it completely clogged up the system with a number of applicants that were going to the US. Now, the waiting time for a green card for someone that has a Chinese passport is currently 10 years. That's a long time. And if you want to take your own business into the US through that route, through the green card route, then the cost to doing so is $1.8 million. Now, by using Grenada and an E2 visa, the cost of the Grenadian citizenship for a family of 4 is $350,000. And then we go and buy a business or go and set up a business in the US. And you can see that the minimum level of investment into that business is $150,000. So for a total cost of $500,000, the same applicant can get into the US for $500,000 and can be there in 7 months. So we've cut the waiting time from 10 years and $1.8 million down to 7 months and $500,000. So it's an extremely good thing if a client is ever looking to ultimately go to the US and wants a very good passport for travel and for taxation. Now, on my last point about taxation, again, it's extremely important because if you want to go and live in the US and you can manage your time effectively, then if you can spend less than 120 days in America, so you could go and become a resident in the US for 119 days a year, then you could spend 6 months or 182 days in continental Europe, and you could spend 180 days in the UK. Where are you income tax resident? You're non-income tax resident in the US for your global earnings because you're there less than 120 days a year. You're non-European tax resident because you spend less than 183 days in there. And you're non-UK tax resident because you're spending less than 183 days in the UK. So your tax residency and your income tax side of things would then fall with Grenada, and there's no tax on foreign income. So it makes you extremely tax efficient, even if you want to go and live in the US. Now, I often help clients who are looking to split their time, and they might want to retire 5 months of the year or 4.5 months of the year in Florida, and then spend some time in Europe and the UK and the rest of the world. They would look at this particular option to do that. Now, I'm just going to finish lastly on if a client is looking for full EU citizenship and they can't wait. They don't want to do Portugal. They don't want to wait for 6 years. They want to do something extremely quickly. Now, if you want European citizenship and you're looking for full-blown, the ability to live, work and conduct business across the entire 27 EU states, then there's really now only one program which can obtain citizenship within 6 months, and that's Cyprus. Cyprus gives us the ability to become a citizen of the EU. It takes 6 months, but you can see there the investment level is much greater than the other programs. So for a family of 4, you're looking at 2.25 million euros worth of investment. Now, 2 million of that is into property, and that 2 million in property needs to be invested there for 5 years. But in 6 months' time, no language test, one visit to Cyprus for 4 days, you could obtain a full EU passport within 6 months. But that's something, if a client can't wait 6 years, they want the ability to have full EU citizenship very quickly, and we'll look to use Cyprus to do that. It's a very low tax regime with no wealth tax, gift tax or inheritance tax, and an extremely good place to set up a business because there's no tax on dividend. So there are lots of different options that we can offer clients, and that clients ask us lots of different questions about lots of different programs. I think the main thing to consider is, what's the most important reason for you and for the family to make that decision to either look at residency or citizenship, and which is the best program moving forward. I hope that helps.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, James. If you just want to
No
stop
problem.
sharing your screen, then everyone will see both of our faces. Excellent. Brilliant. So yes, we've got some questions coming in. What I will do is, first of all, just share the result of the poll and get your opinion on it. Hold on. Yeah, so there we are, share results. So the most popular result was actually to live in another country, followed by tax benefits. Is that pretty much what you see from other clients that you deal with? Is that most common?
Absolutely. I think it's an extremely important thing to look at both things, and that's why I think when discussing residency and citizenship, it's important to look at both things, because I don't want to just give you a passport for freedom of travel and effectively low tax regime upon death. We've also got to think about where you might want to end up, where you might want to live. So I do think it's really important. And to be honest, I would say out of a typical 10 clients that we look at, I would say that 6 or 7 will look at Portugal as an option, because it's effectively a property purchase and the ability to go and live somewhere else. Then 3 out of the next would look at Grenada, because it's freedom of travel, taxation, and the ability to go to the US. And the last one may look at Cyprus, just for the ability to have it like that quickly.
Yeah. Have you seen any changes this year with, obviously travel restrictions and everything this year, and people, a bit more worried about it? Are they with the COVID? Does it bring it to front of mind a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the title of the webinar is quite interesting, because it is freedom. One of the clients that I've taken on in the last 6 months is actually our CEO, who's a Brit, right? And he is someone that he wants ultimate freedom. He doesn't ever want to be in this lockdown environment again. So actually having the ability of freedom of travel, ease of travel, all of those things is something which is really important to himself. So I think that naturally people have spent a bit more time at home thinking about where they might want to end up, thinking about certain restrictions that they have. For me, I look at the UK at the moment, it's in a bit of a mess. And I think to myself, would I actually want to look at an alternative option? Because do I actually want to choose where I want to reside, rather than be forced to reside in a certain part of the world? So I think it's definitely meant a lot of people have looked at ease of travel and also where they might want to end up, and ultimately plan for that. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And so you mentioned there's been a change in the Portugal amount of time they need to spend in the first couple of years. Is that COVID related? Because I mean, obviously a lot of people will say, oh, well, how am I going to get to Portugal, especially from China at the moment? It's difficult to come in and out of the country. How am I going to get to Portugal for 7 days this year, kind of thing?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, the Portuguese program is really good because, we can do everything remotely. We could do everything from China at this present moment in time. So we can set up a bank account, we can get tax fiscal numbers, we can purchase a property. Now, we can then submit residency, and your application is based on when it's submitted. So yes, you have to visit the country, and you visit the country to do your fingerprints and your eye scans, and then you walk out as a resident. But your application is actually based on when it's submitted, not once you've done your eye scans and your fingerprints. So it still allows us to be able to do that. And they've just made it slightly easier to give the client the ability to have 2 years, where they've got 2-year window for them to then visit the country for 2 weeks. So it's made it easier for them. They are making some slight changes to the program. It was originally set up in 2012, and since then to date, there's been 5 billion euros worth of investment into Portuguese property. So a huge program that's been extremely successful. And what they're looking to make a change in is that they're going to take Lisbon and Porto out of places that you can invest to then obtain residency. So those particular city locations have done very well. Property markets boomed. There is not a lot of property left in those areas. So when we find it difficult to find buildings in those particular areas because everything's sold or everything's going through regeneration. So there are still certain pockets of Portugal which still need some really good projects, some really good regeneration, and there's some good areas of growth still available in those other areas. So we look at other peripheral cities, we look at places like Faro, the Algarve, Silver Coast. We still do have a couple of projects in Lisbon until the end of the year, but they do make changes from time to time. One question I was asked from a client earlier today, which is probably quite relevant, is what happens if they change the program? Let me enter the program today, and what happens if they change the program tomorrow? Now, within all of the programs that we look at, they can't change the law retrospectively of when you've entered into the program. So let's say that we entered the program today, then they changed the law and took out Lisbon as an area where we could invest. You entered the program at that point, which means that you can still continue to be in that program for the full 6 years.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, do you see, I'm presuming there's going to be a time span on these programs. Are they? Do you think many of them will run for a long time? Do you see? Have any disappeared since you started doing this?
Yeah, they do change. Malta is somewhere which has disappeared. Malta had a citizenship program. That was extremely difficult anyway, and I think the way that they set out that program, it was a lot more expensive than the others. So most people would then go to the others if they were looking for European citizenship. They would use Cyprus over Malta, things like that. So there are programs that change, but there are also countries that introduce new programs. So we're still waiting to see what happens with the UK at the end of the year, and what will happen to UK immigration, and whether they bring in a points-based system like Australia, like Canada, or whether they look at a CBI program, whether they look at an investment program. But at the moment, the UK is quite difficult, it's quite expensive, and you have to become a tax resident there. So it's something that we can do, but it's £2 million worth of investment, and gives you residency for 3 years, 4 months of becoming a tax resident there. So it's something that we typically advise away from. Yeah,
I imagine most people dealing with Britain at the moment are trying to get a different passport other than their British passport, not trying to gain one.
Yeah, so Brexit will probably be good for somewhere like Portugal, because Brits will need another place to go, and they will just go and buy a lot more property and then do their residency through that and through the Golden Visa program. Yeah.
So which nationality do you think is really looking for this the most at the moment? I know you mentioned South Africa and US. That's mainly tax related, I guess, or is there other ones that are particularly prominent?
Yeah, it's across the board, really. It's a lot of the work that I'm doing is with European and non-European spouses. So, husbands or wives are from Europe and their partners may not be from Europe. So it's giving them the ability to also go to Europe with them rather than spending certain amounts of time in certain locations. I do a lot of work with South Africans, with Chinese, Russians, Indians. I spent a lot of my time last year in India. But I would say that it's really opening up to lots of people looking at it from different reasons. Why is our British CEO looking at it? It's from freedom of travel, taxation, business setup, lots of different reasons and justifications why. And I think the main thing is to boil down to those exact reasons and to use a company that will understand and will look at all of them rather than just selling something because it's very good for us. It's not. It's better from our perspective, and why I built the program the way that I did and using the programs that we do is because we want to take on a client and manage that client through the entire financial journey, not just from a residency and citizenship company. I want to also be able for you guys in the office locally to help manage that client for all of their other financial matters. So that's why we look at it as a good starting point, or we look at helping using our existing client bank by giving them the best option.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. And that's probably a great point to end on as well, because actually that is so important, right? And that's why I know you talk to a lot of clients around the world one-to-one. You want to know what their whole situation is, how that actual residency and citizenship is going to fit into their financial life. That's the most important thing, isn't it? To make sure they're getting the right advice. So actually on that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give people the opportunity to reach out. And if you know, if this subject, you know, it's not this kind of subject that's for everybody, of course, there's lots of different things to think about. But if you do want to look into this in more detail and find out and talk to one of our advisors here in China about citizenship and residency, then you can do, or even perhaps about international property in general. I mean, there's some great property opportunities in Portugal in particular, but also around the world. Or is there something else completely that you want to talk to? Just put your details on there, and we'll make sure someone reaches out to you. And if it's on the citizenship and residency, and if it's appropriate, then we'll make sure James gets in touch with you as well later on down the line. Yeah, and with that, James, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It's been excellent information.
No problem at all. And hope you have a lovely evening, you guys. And please do let me know if you've got any questions. You can find me through the local office or on LinkedIn. And please feel free to reach out anytime.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And anyone who's joining us for the first time, we have a WeChat group, a deVere webinar series WeChat group. So if you're not in that group, speak to whoever invited you or reply to the email that invited you, and we'll add you into that group, because this is our 24th webinar. So we're going to keep going every 2 weeks, and we hope to see you on the future ones. So thank you, everybody. Good evening.
Cheers.